Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive council chamber and felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The room stretched up so high that the ceiling disappeared into darkness, and every wall was filled with alien beings from across the galaxy. Some looked like walking crystals that sparkled with rainbow light. Others were just clouds of glowing gas floating in special containers, and still others had too many eyes or arms or legs to count properly. Jake had been a soldier. Once, a Marine who fought in 3 different wars on Earth before becoming a diplomat. He thought he knew what fear felt like, but standing here today was different. This was not fear of dying in battle, but fear of watching everything his species had worked for crumble into dust. The being in charge was called Council Prime Zolthek, and he was one of the crystal people called Zerathi. When he moved, light bounced off his body in ways that hurt to look at directly. His voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with thunder, and when he spoke, every other sound in the chamber stopped. "The human species has been judged," Zolthek announced, and Jake felt his heart sink even though he had known this moment was coming for months. After careful consideration of all evidence, this council finds humanity too dangerous to remain part of galactic civilization. Jake tried to keep his face calm, but inside he was screaming. 3 years ago, humans had been celebrated as heroes when they helped stop a plague that was killing billions of Vorthan people. 2 years ago, human engineers had saved 3 dying star systems from collapse with technology nobody else could have invented. Just last year, human soldiers had died alongside alien friends fighting against monsters from dark space that wanted to devour everything alive, but none of that mattered now. "Humans expand too fast," continued a being that looked like a giant insect with golden wings. "They take risks that endanger everyone around them. They refuse to follow proper procedures and protocols that have kept the galaxy peaceful for 10,000 years. Another alien, this one shaped like a floating jellyfish with tentacles covered in blinking lights, added his voice to the accusations. "Human military tactics are too brutal and unpredictable. They fight like savages, not civilized beings. Their very presence makes other species uncomfortable and afraid." Jake wanted to shout at them, to remind them of every time humans had bled and died to protect alien worlds. He wanted to tell them about Captain Rodriguez and her mixed crew working together like family among the stars. He wanted to explain that humans only fought hard because they cared so much about protecting others. Instead, he did what diplomats were supposed to do. He stayed calm and tried to reason with them. "Honored council members," Jake began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "humanity has made mistakes, but we have also made great contributions to galactic peace and prosperity. When the Vorthan plague struck, human doctors worked day and night to find a cure. When the Kepler systems were dying, human engineers found solutions that saved billions of lives. When the dark space entities threatened us all, humans stood on the front lines and many never came home." Some of the aliens shifted uncomfortably, and Jake thought maybe he was getting through to them. He pressed on. "Yes, we expand quickly, but we also share everything we learn. Yes, we take risks, but those risks have led to discoveries that benefit everyone. Yes, we fight fiercely, but only to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Is this really so dangerous that we must be cast out from the community we have served faithfully?" Zolthek's crystal body flashed brighter for a moment, which Jake had learned meant the Zerathi was feeling strong emotions. The human capacity for violence and unpredictable behavior makes other species fear for their safety. Your expansion threatens the established order that has brought peace to the galaxy. Your refusal to submit fully to council authority shows that you consider yourselves above the laws that govern civilized beings. "We have never broken council law," Jake protested. "But you have bent it to breaking," replied the insect being. "You interpret rules in ways that serve your purposes while technically staying within legal boundaries. This shows a dangerous disregard for the spirit of galactic cooperation." Jake looked around the chamber, searching for friendly faces among the hundreds of alien representatives. He found a few beings from species that humans had helped or worked closely with over the years. But they were too few, and they looked away when his eyes met theirs. The vote was called, and Jake watched as lights appeared above each representative's position. Green for keeping humans in the council, red for expulsion. The green lights were scattered and lonely among a sea of red. When the counting finished, the numbers appeared in glowing symbols that every species could understand. 847 votes for expulsion. 23 votes to let humans stay. The decision is final, Zalthek announced. All human presence must be withdrawn from council space within 30 standard days. Any human found beyond the Sol system boundary after that time will be considered an illegal invader. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach, but he forced himself to stand straight. What about human citizens living on alien worlds? What about the mixed families who have built lives together? What about humans who have nowhere else to go? That is not the council's concern, the jellyfish being replied coldly. Humans chose to spread across the galaxy without proper consideration for the consequences. Now they must deal with those consequences. Jake looked around the chamber one more time. Some aliens were celebrating, others looked uncomfortable, and a few seemed genuinely sad. But the decision was made, and nothing he could say or do would change it. Very well, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. Humanity will comply with the Council's decision. We will withdraw from all territories beyond our home system. But I want you to remember this day, and I want you to remember what you are throwing away. He paused, looking directly at Zalthek. You fear us because we are different, because we do not fit into your careful plans and ancient procedures. You call us dangerous because we adapt and change and refuse to stay in the boxes you have built for civilized behavior. But those same qualities that frighten you have saved lives and solved problems that your traditional methods could not handle. Jake began walking toward the chamber's exit, but he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. We will remember who stood with us today and who chose fear over friendship. And someday, when you face challenges that your careful procedures cannot solve, you will remember what it felt like to have humans fighting beside you instead of wondering what we might have become if you had let us stay. The great doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder, and Jake Morrison walked away from the greatest diplomatic failure in human history. 3 years had passed since the day Jake Morrison walked out of the council chamber, and the galaxy felt like a much lonelier place for humanity. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her ship watching the last transport vessel disappear into hyperspace, carrying the final group of human colonists away from what had once been called New Hope Colony. The planet below them had been beautiful once, with golden wheat fields stretching to every horizon and cities that sparkled like jewels in the morning sun. Now the automated systems would keep everything running for a while, but without people to maintain them, the cities would slowly crumble and the fields would return to wild grass and scattered trees. Lisa had been exploring the far reaches of space when the expulsion order came through 3 years ago. Her ship carried a mixed crew of humans and aliens who had worked together so well that she sometimes forgot they were different species at all. But the council decision had forced terrible choices on everyone. Some of her alien friends had chosen to stay with their human shipmates, knowing they could never return to their homeworlds. Others had said tearful goodbyes and taken transport ships back to council space, unable to give up everything they had known their entire lives. The hardest goodbye had been with Cathara, a young Deltan engineer who had become like a sister to Lisa over their 2 years of exploration together. The blue-skinned woman with 4 arms had been the best engineer Lisa had ever worked with, able to fix anything that broke and improve things that were already working perfectly on their last day together. Cathara had grabbed Lisa's hands with all 4 of her own and spoken with tears flowing down her face. I want to stay with you, but my family needs me. My mother is sick, and my children are too young to understand why their parent might never come home. But I will never forget what we built together out here among the stars. Lisa understood, even though it broke her heart to watch her friend leave. The council had been clever in their cruelty, giving people just enough time to make impossible choices, but not enough time to find better solutions. Now, Lisa commanded a ship crewed entirely by humans and the few aliens brave enough or desperate enough to choose exile with their human friends. They moved through space documenting the abandoned human colonies, recording everything for future generations who might want to know what had been lost. On the industrial world of New Detroit, Admiral Dan Carter oversaw the massive operation of bringing humanity home. The planet had been the shipbuilding center for half the galaxy, with factories that could construct anything from tiny scout ships to massive cargo vessels that could carry entire cities between the stars. Carlos Martinez had been the chief engineer for the largest shipyard, working alongside beings from 20 different worlds to create vessels that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Now he watched as the great assembly lines shut down one by one, their alien workers heading home and their human crews packing up tools and equipment to take back to Earth. 40 years of work, Carlos said to his assistant as they sealed the last crate of technical manuals. 40 years of building ships that made the galaxy smaller and safer for everyone. Now it all gets packed into boxes like it never mattered at all. His assistant, a young woman named Rebecca Stone, who had grown up on New Detroit, looked around the empty factory floor. "Will we ever build ships like this again?" Carlos shrugged. "Maybe humans are good at building things, but it will take decades to replace what we are leaving behind here, and we will have to do it alone." The hardest part was not just the physical work of moving millions of people and countless tons of equipment. It was watching friendships and partnerships that had taken years to build dissolve in a matter of weeks. Dr. Amy Foster led a team of scientists working frantically to preserve as much knowledge as possible before the deadline expired. They had managed to copy vast databases of technical information, scientific discoveries, and cultural exchanges between species, but much was being lost forever. The Zerathi shared their crystal growing techniques with us just last year, Amy explained to her team as they worked through another sleepless night. Now they have changed the access codes and we cannot get the complete data. 3 years of joint research on energy crystals just vanished because someone decided we are too dangerous to trust. Some of the alien scientists had tried to help, secretly sending partial data or incomplete research notes through hidden channels. But the Council was watching carefully, and anyone caught helping humans faced punishment on their own worlds. On the agricultural world of Harvest, Jenny Walsh coordinated the evacuation of 3 million human farmers and their families. The planet had been paradise for anyone who loved working with growing things, with soil so rich that crops grew twice as fast as they did on Earth and weather so perfect that harvest season lasted almost year-round. The food we grew here fed 12 different worlds, Jenny told the last group of families waiting for transport ships. When the Council gets hungry enough, maybe they will remember what they threw away. An elderly farmer named Bob Turner had lived on Harvest for 30 years. Watching his children grow up under alien suns and his grandchildren learn to speak languages from across the galaxy. My grandson's best friend was a young Kithara whose family lived in the next valley. They played together every day for 5 years. Now they will probably never see each other again. The transport ship arrived on schedule, its human crew efficient and professional despite the sadness that hung over everything like fog. As the ship lifted off, Jenny watched the vast grain fields disappear below them. Automated systems would keep the crops growing for a while, but without people to guide them. The great farms would slowly return to wilderness. Not all humans had followed the withdrawal order. Small groups of what people called ghosts had gone completely underground, in council space using false identities and hidden bases to maintain a secret human presence. The Council knew they existed, but had trouble finding them because humans were very good at disappearing when they wanted to. These ghost operations gathered intelligence about what was happening in Council space and maintained hidden supply caches, in case humans ever needed to return quickly. They were dangerous missions that required people willing to spend years or even decades away from home, never knowing if they would ever see Earth again. As the deadline approached, Captain Lisa Rodriguez made one final journey through the abandoned human territories. Her ship moved silently through empty space, past colonies that had once bustled with life and industry. She recorded everything she saw, creating a memorial to what humanity had built and what they had been forced to leave behind, the last human. Ship crossed the Sol system boundary with just hours to spare before the Council deadline expired. Behind them lay empty worlds and broken dreams. Ahead lay an uncertain future and the task of rebuilding everything they had lost. Admiral Don Carter sent a single message to the Galactic Council as the last ship arrived at Earth. Withdrawal complete. We hope you are satisfied with what you have accomplished. 5 years after humanity's expulsion, the galaxy trembled under an invasion that no one had seen coming. The Vorthic Empire had returned from the dark regions beyond known space, bringing with them ships that defied everything the Council thought. They knew about warfare and weapons that turned entire planets into clouds of dust. Council military strategist Cuthmoran stared at the tactical display in the war room deep beneath Nexus Prime and felt something he had never experienced before. In his 3 centuries of life, complete helplessness. The red markers representing Vorthak fleets moved across the galaxy map like a spreading disease, consuming everything in their path. How many ships did they lose taking the Kepler defense grid? Cuthmoran asked his aide, a young Deltan officer, whose blue skin had turned pale with worry. None, sir. The defense grid never fired a shot. The Vorthak ships appeared in the middle of the formation and destroyed the command vessels before anyone could react. The remaining ships surrendered or fled. Cuthmoran's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep confusion among his people. That is impossible. The Kepler grid was designed to prevent exactly that kind of surprise attack. The sensor networks should have detected any approaching fleet days before they arrived. But the evidence was undeniable. The Vorthak had somehow moved an entire battle fleet through space without being detected, appeared in the perfect position to strike, and destroyed one of the Council's most important defensive positions in less than 20 minutes. The pattern was the same everywhere the Vorthak attacked. They appeared without warning, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Their tactics were unlike anything in the Council's military databases, and traditional defensive strategies proved useless against them. What made it worse was that some of the older military advisors kept muttering that the Vorthak fighting style reminded them of something familiar. When pressed, they admitted it looked like the unconventional tactics humans had used during the Dark Space War, but taken to extremes that even humans had never attempted. War Prince Thexara commanded the Vorthak invasion from his flagship, a massive vessel that seemed to change shape depending on what kind of battle it was fighting. Unlike the elegant curves and artistic designs favored by Council shipbuilders, Vorthak ships looked like they had been built for only one purpose: destroying other ships as efficiently as possible. Thexara had studied every battle the humans had ever fought, learning from their tactics and improving upon their strategies. Where humans had been willing to take calculated risks, the Vorthak took risks that bordered on insanity. Where humans had adapted quickly to changing situations, the Vorthak adapted so fast that they seemed to know what their enemies would do before their enemies knew it themselves. The Council races fight like they are dancing, Thexara told his fleet commanders as they prepared for the assault on Nexus Prime. Everything follows ancient patterns and established procedures. They are predictable because they value order above victory. We will show them what happens when order meets chaos. On Earth, President Kate Williams sat in the secure briefing room beneath the White House and listened to intelligence reports that made her stomach twist with worry. The data came from the ghost operatives who had remained hidden in Council space, and it painted a picture of galactic civilization collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. 47 worlds conquered or destroyed in 18 months, Director Paul Graham reported, his weathered face grim. The Council fleets are scattered and demoralized. Traditional defensive tactics are proving completely ineffective against Vorthak strategies. Admiral Don Carter, now serving as Earth's Minister of Defense, pointed to several markers on the galactic map. The Vorthak advance is following predictable patterns toward the core worlds. If this continues, they will control the entire Council space within 2 years. President Williams studied the map carefully, and after that, our analysts believe the Vorthak will continue expanding. Earth is directly in their path once they finish with the Council worlds. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Humanity had been cast out by the Council for being too dangerous and unpredictable, but now they faced an enemy that made human tactics look conservative by comparison. What do our ghost operatives report about Council requests for assistance? The President asked. Paul Graham consulted his secure tablet. Unofficial contacts from 37 different worlds asking for help. The Deltan Confederacy has formally requested human military advisors. Even some council members are sending private messages asking if Earth would consider intervention. And the official council position? Complete silence. Publicly, they still maintain that humanity is too dangerous to be allowed back into galactic civilization. President Williams leaned back in her chair, thinking about the impossible position they faced. The same council that had expelled humanity for being aggressive and unpredictable now needed exactly those qualities to survive. But pride and fear kept them from admitting their mistake. The first major test came at the Battle of Kepler Station, where Council Admiral Zethkala commanded a fleet of 2,000 ships against 800 Vorthic vessels. On paper, the Council force should have won easily. The ships were well armed, the crews were experienced, and they held defensive positions around a heavily fortified space station. The battle lasted 4 hours, and ended with the complete destruction of the Council fleet. Dr. Amy Foster watched the battle recordings from her laboratory on Luna, analyzing every detail of the Vorthic tactics with growing amazement and horror. The enemy ships moved like they were alive, flowing around Council formations like water around rocks and striking weak points that should have been impossible to identify in the chaos of battle. They are using human tactical principles, she explained to her research team, but they have taken them far beyond anything we ever attempted. Look at this sequence where they sacrifice an entire squadron to create an opening for their main attack. No human commander would have made that choice because we value the lives of our people too much. Her assistant, a young scientist named Tim Parker, who had been born on one of the abandoned colonies, studied the recordings with fascination. So they learned from us and made our tactics more ruthless? Exactly. They took our flexibility and unpredictability and removed all moral constraints. The result is tactically brilliant but strategically terrifying. As news of the defeat spread through Council space, panic began to set in. Worlds that had been secure for centuries suddenly found themselves requesting emergency evacuation assistance. The great trade routes that had connected galactic civilization for millennia began to collapse as systems withdrew into defensive isolation. Council Prime Zolthek, the same crystal being who had pronounced humanity's expulsion, now faced the possibility that his own civilization might not survive the decade. The irony was not lost on him that the qualities he had feared in humanity were exactly what the Council needed to face this new threat, but pride and political reality made it impossible to simply reverse the expulsion decision. Too many Council members had built their careers on the platform that humanity was dangerous and should be excluded. Admitting they had been wrong would destroy the credibility of the entire Council system. So the galaxy burned while its leaders debated and delayed, and humanity watched from their exile, knowing that their turn would come soon enough. The Vorthic siege of Nexus Prime began on a Tuesday morning when the first wave of enemy ships appeared like ghosts materializing from empty space. Council Prime Zolthek stood in the emergency command center watching his world die and wondered if this was how humanity had felt when they were forced to abandon everything they had built among the stars. The great crystal spires that had stood for 10,000 years cracked and fell as Vorthic bombardment turned the most beautiful city in the galaxy into rubble and dust. Evacuation ships lifted off carrying panicked Council members while automated defense systems tried desperately to hold back an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move before it was made. How long can the planetary shields hold? Zolthek asked his military advisor, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Perhaps 6 hours at current bombardment levels, came the reply. The Vorthic are using focused gravity weapons that we have never seen before. Our shields were not designed to handle this type of attack. Zolthek felt his crystal body dim with despair. Nexus Prime had been considered the most secure world in the galaxy, protected by defense systems that had never failed in 3 millennia. Now it was falling in less than a day. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. The Kithera Hive worlds went silent one by one as Vorthic forces swept through their systems. The floating cities of the Nebula folk were pulled from their gas giant homes and crushed like soap bubbles. Ancient civilizations that had survived wars, plagues, and cosmic disasters found themselves helpless against an enemy that fought like demons from the darkest nightmares on Earth. The global parliament met in emergency session as reports flooded in from their ghost operatives scattered across council space. The news was uniformly terrible, but what shocked everyone was how many requests for help were coming through secret channels. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat in the visitors' gallery watching the debate unfold below him. 5 years of retirement had not dulled his understanding of galactic politics, and he could see the impossible position his planet faced. Help the Council and risk everything on behalf of people who had cast them out, or stay safe and watch the galaxy burn until the fire reached Earth's doorstep. Senator Marie Johnson was speaking passionately about the folly of intervention. They stabbed us in the back when we needed friendship and understanding. They called us dangerous and unpredictable and threw us out like garbage. Now they want us to come running to save them? Let them face the consequences of their own choices. Her words drew applause from many representatives, but General Rick Stone rose to offer a different perspective. I understand the anger, but we are not talking about helping the Council. We are talking about helping innocent people who are dying while their leaders are too proud to admit they made a mistake. More importantly, we are talking about our own survival. The Vorthak will not stop when they finish with the Council worlds. President Kate Williams had been listening to both sides for hours, weighing arguments that all made sense but led to contradictory conclusions. The political reality was that most humans supported leaving the Council to face their problems alone. The practical reality was that Earth would eventually face the Vorthak by themselves if the Council fell. Dr. Amy Foster provided the information that finally tipped the balance. Her analysis of captured Vorthak technology revealed something that changed everything. The enemy ships are using principles we taught the galaxy during our time in the Council, she explained to the parliamentary session. But they have continued developing those principles while we were in exile. Their weapons, their tactics, their entire approach to warfare is based on human innovations that they have taken to logical extremes. She activated a holographic display, showing Vorthak ship designs. Look at these adaptive armor systems. We developed the basic technology, shared it with our allies, and the knowledge eventually reached the Vorthak. Now they are using improved versions of our own inventions against the people we once called friends. Tim Parker, now her chief assistant, added his own disturbing discovery. The Vorthak Tactical Database includes detailed records of every human battle from the past 50 years. They have studied our methods more carefully than we have studied them ourselves. President Williams felt a chill as she realized the implications. Are you saying they learned from us how to defeat the Council? More than that, Amy replied. They learned from us how to defeat anyone who fights using traditional methods. The same flexibility and unpredictability that the Council feared in humanity is now being used against them by an enemy with no moral constraints. The debate continued for 2 more days while the Vorthak tightened their grip on Council space. Finally, Commodore Lisa Rodriguez was called to address the Parliament. She had spent the past 5 years commanding Earth's deep space reconnaissance forces, watching the galaxy from a distance and preparing for threats that might someday reach human space. I have been studying Vorthak tactics since they first appeared, she told the assembled representatives. They are good, better than anything the Council can field. But they have weaknesses that they do not know about because they have never faced truly adaptive opponents. She paused, looking around the chamber. The Council learned our basic methods but never understood our underlying philosophy. They copied our techniques without grasping our principles. The Vorthak made the same mistake. They can imitate human tactics, but they cannot think like humans. General Stone leaned forward. What do you mean? Human military doctrine is based on protecting people, not just winning battles. We take risks to save lives, we adapt to minimize casualties, and we never give up as long as there are people depending on us. The Vorthak learned our techniques, but not our motivations. They fight like humans who have forgotten why humans fight. Lisa activated her own tactical display, showing projected battle scenarios. If we engage them using pure human doctrine, not the watered-down version the Council learned, we can exploit weaknesses they do not even know they have. The final argument came from an unexpected source. A transmission arrived from Council. Space, sent through channels so secret that only 3 people on Earth knew they existed. The message was from Cathara, Lisa's old engineering friend who had chosen to return to her homeworld years earlier. Lisa, I know you cannot respond to this message, but I hope you will hear it. My world is dying. The Vorthak are coming and we have no way to stop them. I am not asking you to save the Council that cast you out. I am asking you to remember that there are people here who never wanted to see you go. People who are about to die because their leaders were too afraid and too proud to keep their friends close. The message continued with technical data about Vorthak, ship movements and defensive weaknesses that only someone with Cathara's engineering expertise could have identified. She was risking her life to help the people who had once been her shipmates. President Williams called for a final vote as the last evacuees fled from Nexus Prime. The decision was closer than anyone had expected. 847 votes for intervention. 823 votes against. The same number that had cast humanity out of galactic civilization would now decide whether humanity would return to save it. As the session ended, Jake Morrison looked down at the representatives filing out of the chamber and wondered if they had just made the biggest mistake in human history or taken the first step toward something better than what had come before. The first sign that something had changed came when a Vorthak raiding fleet attacking the mining world of Kepler 7 suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they did not recognize. The human ships appeared from nowhere, fought like nothing in their tactical databases, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive, leaving behind only the wreckage of Vorthak vessels and 3 million rescued civilians. Admiral Dan Carter commanded the operation from the bridge of the newly commissioned Battleship Defiant, a warship designed using 6 years of isolated human innovation. The ship looked nothing like the elegant vessels humanity had built during their time in the Council, appearing instead like a predator built for hunting other predators. Status report, Carter asked his tactical officer as the last rescue ship jumped to hyperspace. All civilian transports safely away, sir. Enemy losses, 12 heavy cruisers, 37 fighters. Our losses, 0. Carter nodded grimly. The Vorthak had fought exactly as predicted, using tactics copied from old human battle records without understanding the thinking behind them. It was like watching someone try to paint a masterpiece by copying brushstrokes without seeing the whole picture. Commodore Lisa Rodriguez led the next operation, a daring raid on the Vorthak supply base at Sigma Centauri. Her task force of 60 ships faced nearly twice that number of enemy vessels, but the battle unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance of destruction. The human ships fought as individuals rather than formations, each captain making split-second decisions that confused and overwhelmed Vorthak tactical computers. Where the enemy expected coordinated group attacks, they faced dozens of separate threats that appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the darkness of space. "Target their command ship," Lisa ordered as her fleet scattered around the enemy formation. Like drops of mercury. "All units, Independence Protocol. Trust your instincts and protect each other." The Battle of Sigma Centauri lasted 4 hours and became the stuff of legend throughout the galaxy. Human ships dancing between enemy fire, striking weak points that should have been impossible to identify, and working together with a coordination that seemed telepathic to outside observers. When the smoke cleared, the entire Vorthak force had been destroyed or driven off while the humans lost only 8 ships. More importantly, They had rescued over 2 million refugees from 3 different species who had been trapped on the surface when the Vorthic invasion began. News of the human victories spread through council space faster than official communications could travel. On worlds under siege, people looked up at the stars and dared to hope for the first time in months. In refugee camps scattered across the galaxy, beings who had lost everything began to believe that maybe their children would have a future after all. Council Prime Zolthek, now operating from a temporary capital on the fortress world of Carthan, faced the most difficult decision of his long life. The evidence was undeniable that human intervention had saved dozens of worlds and turned the tide of several crucial battles. But admitting error meant acknowledging that the Council's greatest mistake had been driving away their most effective defenders. "The humans are not asking to rejoin the Council," his chief advisor pointed out during one of their emergency sessions. "They are simply helping people who need help. Perhaps we can work with them without formally reversing the expulsion decision." Zolthek's crystal body flickered with conflicting emotions. "And what happens after the war? Do we tell them to leave again once we no longer need their help? Do we pretend that nothing has changed?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, because everyone in the room knew there was no good answer. The galaxy had changed, and the old certainties that had guided council policy for millennia no longer applied to the reality they faced. The climax came with the Second Battle of Nexus Prime, where humanity led a combined fleet of Council survivors and Free World Alliance forces against the main Vorthak armada. President Kate Williams herself traveled to the battle aboard Earth's flagship, not as a conqueror seeking revenge, but as a leader offering hope. "We are not here to rejoin your council," she announced in a broadcast that reached every inhabited world in the galaxy. "We are here because the Vorthic threaten everything we have all worked to build. Today, we fight together not as council members or outcasts, but as neighbors in this galaxy we all call home." The battle was brutal and costly, with ships from dozens of species fighting side by side against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable just months before. But human tactics and innovation proved decisive in ways that surprised even the human commanders. War Prince Vexara found his carefully planned strategies crumbling as human ships did things that violated every principle of conventional warfare. They sacrificed tactical advantages to save alien crews, took impossible risks to protect civilian evacuation routes, and fought with a desperate creativity that his tactical computers could not predict or counter. "They fight like they did during the Dark Space War," he told his bridge crew as his flagship came under attack from 3 directions at once. "But they have learned new tricks that we never accounted for." The turning point came when Commodore Rodriguez led a direct assault on the Vorthak command ship, using a maneuver so dangerous that it should have resulted in the destruction of her entire squadron. Instead, her ships appeared inside the enemy formation like avenging angels, striking the War Prince's vessel with concentrated fire that overwhelmed its defenses in seconds. As the Xara's flagship exploded, the remaining Vorthak forces lost their coordination and began a desperate retreat toward the galactic rim. The invasion that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization was broken, not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by the same unpredictable creativity that had once made the Council fear humanity. The war's end brought not triumphant celebration, but quiet reflection. Too many had died, too much had been lost, and too many mistakes had been made for anyone to feel entirely victorious. But from the ashes of conflict came something new and potentially better than what had existed before. Jake Morrison, called out of retirement to help negotiate the post-war arrangements, found himself once again standing before an assembly of galactic representatives. But this time the chamber was different, built not as a monument to council authority, but as a meeting place for equals. "We all learned something these past years," he said, looking out at faces that showed a mixture of gratitude, embarrassment, and hope. "The galaxy is not made stronger by excluding those who think differently, it is made stronger by including them. Humanity does not need your approval to be who we are, just as you do not need ours. But together, we can be something none of us could achieve alone." The new Galactic Alliance that emerged from the war looked nothing like the old Council. Instead of a hierarchical system that demanded conformity, it became a loose confederation that valued diversity of thought and approach. Human innovation centers worked alongside alien research institutes, mixed crews once again explored unknown regions, and on Nexus Prime, rebuilt as a symbol of cooperation rather than authority. A simple memorial honored all who had died in the war. Dr. Amy Foster, now director of the Interspecies Science Foundation, often stood before that memorial and reflected on how fear had nearly destroyed everything they had built together. The galaxy had driven humanity out in terror of what they might become, but working together, they had all become something better than anyone had dared imagine.